Please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of Schulerstadt and to the textbook for which it stands, one class, under Mark, indivisible, with liberty and justice for none.
Good morning, Miranda. Good morning. And good morning, Schulerstadt. I'm Grant Mitchell.
And I'm Miranda Capamacho. Today we bring to you special coverage of consumerism and globalization practices across the world to determine whether our emperor, Mark Schuler, should implement Western consumerism in our lovely nation of Schulerstadt.
That's right, Miranda. This all started with the transition from political imperialism to cultural imperialism after World War II and the Cold War. Now the time has come to decide whether we should join this stream of basement that the world has begun to follow.
For those viewers out there who are a bit confused on cultural imperialism, Boullier defines it as the domination of one culture over another by a deliberate policy or by economic or technological superiority. This diffusion of culture across the globe has consisted mainly of Western culture.
But don't forget, dumb Americans aren't everything. There has been a recent increase in the amount of popular culture that is spreading internationally.
Technological advancements over the past century have fueled this spread of pop culture greatly, allowing an international culture, economy, and technological field to develop.
Various opinions and stances have developed around the globe. Some seem to widely accept it, even encourage it, but rejection is quite prevalent in some areas.
We now take you to Andrew Horton, Schulerstadt reporter in the Middle East.
Good morning, Grant and Miranda. It's great to be with you.
Yes, now Andy, how are things over there in terms of Western culture?
Well, Miranda, Westerners here are on the DL. As you can see, I am at the scene of a market in Iran. Right now, every woman is in traditional, concealing garb, and her sole purpose in the market is to get food and bring it back to her family.
Andy, how would you say women in Iran seem to measure up to women in Western countries?
Now, it's definitely clear here in Iran that women exercise an incredibly restricted influence and are unresembling of Western women.
Is this due to religious practices?
I would say so, Miranda. Islam is very restrictive on the scope of women in society. Sharia law serves as an underlying backbone to the political structure of Iran and ties into the condescending view on globalization.
Have you talked to any of the locals yet about their practices and thoughts on the West?
Not yet, but here comes a local man this way. Excuse me, sir. May we have an interview for Schulerstadt News on Channel 11? By the way, 11 is for the number of letters in Genghis Khan's name.
Genghis Khan is my hero. And sure, ask me anything, as long as it's not about the West. I hate it so much.
Actually, that's exactly what I wanted to ask you about. I assume from your response that you don't think too highly of the West and its globalization.
Globalization is like a disease. It's basically Ebola on steroids. And if we aren't careful, it will destroy our culture, corrupt our children, and turn into mindless vessels of Western consumerism.
I can see why that would be a serious concern. Can you give me some specific examples of globalization and Western influence here in the Middle East?
Are you blind or just stupid? Look at your left, the McDonald's, right there. 2 teenage delinquents wearing jeans, all of these Western things. But don't even get me started on Coca-Cola. If I see just one more billboard advertising that horrible drink, I might puke.
Interesting. Let's talk about your religion.
Let's not.
Does being a Muslim influence your opinion of globalization and consumerism?
Absolutely. Islam has much emphasis on traditionalism, and I believe that introducing this Western garbage is going to weaken our country's commitment to our Muslim heritage. Not only that, but the behavior of those Western women is scandalous. Could you imagine if women here began to think such clothing and consumer practices were acceptable? It would be catastrophic.
Okay, I understand what you mean. What about technology, though? You have to admit that globalization has increased the access of new technology for people all around the world. Isn't that a good thing?
Excuse me, but we're doing just fine without the West's so wonderful technology.
Well, obviously, this seems like a hot topic here in the Middle East. But now, back to you, Miranda.
Thank you, Andy.
Now, Miranda, I think the people in the Middle East may be downplaying the role and importance of technology in developing an interconnected globe.
I agree, Grant. Technology has allowed for the faster spread of culture and ideas, especially through enhanced communications and the internet. We see this greatly through the development of a pop culture around the world.
A good example of this is in East Asia, so let's head to our field reporter there, Madison Landis, who is in Beijing with the lowdown on globalization in China.
Thank you, Miranda and Grant. It's a beautiful day here in Beijing, and to be honest, I can't really tell the difference between downtown here and New York City.
So Madison, tell our viewers back here in Schulerstand, what are you seeing as you walk the streets?
Well, there seems to be a big line here at Starbucks across the street from the Apple Store, which makes me think that people here have widely accepted Western culture. I'm gonna go try and talk to some people here to get a sense of how technology impacts their Chinese lifestyle. Excuse me, ma'am. Could I have a moment of your time to do an interview for our news show back in Schulerstand?
Of course, Emperor Schuler is my idol. I do anything for this country.
Okay, why don't you start off by telling me a little bit about how Western culture and new technology affects your life here in China?
Well, here in the city, it's quite obvious how technology is prevalent in everyday life. Check out my Michael Kors purse. It holds my iPhone 6 Plus perfectly. Also, there has been an increase in exportation of goods.
Ah, lovely purse, by the way. But anyways, would you say that this integration of culture across the globe has been positive for you?
Absolutely! Not only do we have more access to consumer goods, but there have been an increase in women's rights as well. As China has accepted more Western ideas and has modernized, there has been a shift from traditional Chinese values to more modern ideas. Instead of foot binding and submission, women now have the ability to express themselves more freely.
That sure does seem like a positive effect of globalization. Well, thank you. And back to you in Schulerstand, Miranda.
Thank you, Madison.
We had the chance to sit down with an economic specialist from the Northwestern Southern, Pak Seneca, Shanghai Ming Manchuria, Sun Yat-sen, Nationalist Party, Shang, Oracle Bones, Nanjing region in China to talk about the economic importance of globalization for the Chinese economy.
Hello, Mr. Khan. Could you give me some insight on the recent growth in the Chinese economy?
Well, for starters, this idiot American named Austin Sahusky came in and renamed our region some sort of WHAP obsession thing. It's so dumb. But besides that, life here is pretty good, and our main political thought process revolves around the idea, the Mongols will rise again.
Yes, I see. So anyways, back to the Chinese economy now.
Ah, yeah. Industrialization and development in the economy here, particularly after the reforms of Deng Xiaoping, has allowed China to rise to the global stage economically and rival with the great Western powers. In particular, this area, with the absence of agricultural utilities and land fertility, has seen heavy industrialization.
And do you feel that the most of the typical Chinese public are open to economic practices that increasingly resemble those of the West? Or would they prefer to preserve their more traditional attitudes?
Well, from my observations, people in areas that have been agrarian-oriented for centuries definitely wish to preserve traditional ideals in terms of the economy, while in major cities, people are becoming open to capitalist and Western economic practices. At this point in China's economic development, though, I believe the country has no choice but to further resemble Western countries. But don't forget, the Mongols will rise again!
Thank you for those enlightening words, particularly that last statement.
Well, this has been a wonderful show of Schulerstand News. I'm Miranda,
And I'm Grant,
and we'll see you next week for our show on the legacy of the Mongols.
with special guest, Chachi Schuler.